So it looks like we are going to have to join our opponent here with the mulligan. So yeah, just no lands in the first hand. Of course, we're going to mulligan. Here we don't have a hexproof creature, which could be very bad depending on what the matchup is. But I believe we are supposed to keep this sort of hand. And Unflinching Courage, probably unnecessary. If we are able to get the Core Spirit Dancer down and start putting a bunch of enchantments on it, we already have one way to give our guy lifelink. So I'm going to put the Courage on the bottom. Reason being there is that if our opponent kills the Core Spirit Dancer, that's worst case scenario. And we're going to have to really figure out alternative ways to win at that point. So we could play the Windswept Heath, which I'm going to do. And just the question is going to be, we see the Noble Hierarch, we see the Blooming Marsh, so that likely means we're up against Abzan, which means that we may not want to just immediately run out the Core Spirit Dancer. It's very risky to do that, but we'll see what our opponent's play is. So it's Liliana the Last Hope. Not Liliana the Veil, which would be much worse for us to see. Now, that's not to say that the Last Hope isn't good. We just have a pretty big decision here. Do we fetch for Temple Garden and just essentially go for playing the Core Spirit Dancer next turn? Well, let's go ahead and draw our next card. See if we get any more information. So it's a Razor Birch Thicket. So the question is basically, what do we gain by waiting to play the Core Spirit Dancer? So I think we could potentially get lucky, and maybe our opponent taps out, and we can somehow play Spirit Dancer and then put an Umbra on it. So I kind of like just passing, hoping our opponent taps out for a creature. If they don't, we're still going to go for the Spirit Dancer next turn no matter what. Now, we could get punished by something like a discard spell here. That's also a potential scenario. So it looks like our opponent may not be tapping out, leaving up mana for a card like a Fatal Push, perhaps, or a Path to Exile are the cards we're going to be worried about if our opponent just has the Godless Shrine available. At the same time, we're just going to go for it now. We don't really have much of a choice, so I'm going to search for a Temple Garden now with the Windswept Heath. And the nice thing about this play is that even if the Spirit Dancer does die, we're gonna draw this card no matter what. So, and if it doesn't die, then the Spider Umbra is on the Spirit Dancer to protect it. So, okay, great. So now we've got a protected Core Spirit Dancer in a sense. So we're hoping to be able to untap now with the Spirit Dancer. If our opponent has something like, say, Maelstrom Pulse as their removal spell, then this play is perfect because we don't really care if our opponent Maelstrom Pulses the Spider Umbra, for instance. So now we're getting hit by an Inquisition, but our opponent's going to see that our hand is pretty redundant now. So even if our opponent takes Daybreak Coronet, likely the best card in our hand, we've still got another couple of enchantments we can put on our Core Spirit Dancer to make it huge. Take this Liliana off the board and set ourselves up pretty well. And so our opponent may be kicking themselves now. Maybe they probably just drew the Inquisition, so that's fortunate. for our side of the table. But sometimes the Abzan deck does this. Like, the main threat happens to be Liliana, the Last Hope, which these decks are trending towards playing Liliana, the Last Hope, over Liliana the Veil in some situations, as we're seeing now, which works perfectly from our standpoint because Liliana the Veil could have killed the Spirit Dancer, and it turns out our opponent just didn't have removal. So we were playing around a removal spell that essentially didn't exist, but I think we're in a good spot either way at this point. So we can afford to just take this hit from the Shambling Vent. And now we can really start getting going here with the Core Spirit Dancer. We also drew a Boggle. So I'm going to lead off on the Griff Spoon. We, of course, get this card draw trigger, which we will elect to use. And perfect. Couldn't have asked for anything better here. So I'm just going to play the Daybreak Coronet on the Core Spirit Dancer. Of course, go for that extra card. So we've got a huge Core Spirit Dancer now. I'm going to go ahead and go after this Liliana, the Last Hope, just to be safe, get it off the table, and then follow up with the Slippery Boggle. So this is just going to give us more protection against Edict effects. And yeah, so that's gonna do it for the game. So this matchup is actually can be tough. If our opponent had the removal spell for the Spirit Dancer, it would have been a lot tougher. Now maybe we still draw that Boggle and get back into the game, but I like boarding in the Leyline of Sanctities in this matchup because our opponent's going to be on the discard plan. So Inquisitions, Thoughtseize, even Liliana. Although this does not actually prevent the uptick of Liliana, but it's going to prevent just basic discard spells. Collective Brutality is a card we don't care too much about. But it does what it does do is prevent against Liliana ticking down and attempting to make us sacrifice a creature with an Edict effect, which is what we're most vulnerable to in the Abzan deck. So we're definitely boarding in all 4 Leyline of Sanctities. So in terms of what to take out, and by the way, Rest in Peace is also a card we are likely going to want to bring in as well because of the Tarmogoyfs and Lingering Souls. So it's just going to make this a grindier matchup. We can afford to start cutting cards. Spirit Link, just kind of low impact overall. So some of our one-ofs, Keen Sense, drawing cards is certainly nice, but we need to have that creature in play first in order to do it. Griff's Boon. Our opponent likely has Lingering Souls. Maybe they're boarding some out, but because of that, the flying isn't super important. So I'm okay with boarding that card out. Path to Exile. We can trim down on those because we're not really trying to play that 1-for-1 game. We're trying to get one of our creatures into play and win with it. And then I think we can go ahead and trim 1 copy of Spider Umbra. Keeping in all the Spirit Dancers, even though they're vulnerable to removal. As we saw that last game, sometimes your opponent just doesn't have the removal spell. So I am happy with this configuration. And we have a very interesting hand here that we're going to have to mulligan. So it's 4 Core Spirit Dancers, which is just way too many, of course, of that card. Now, we're happy to have Leyline in our opening hand, but we also don't have the second land. There's too much that needs to work out in our favor with this hand. So I'm going to go ahead and mulligan. And, okay, so we have a Leyline. We don't have a creature. That's the unfortunate part, but we have a scry. I'm inclined to keep this and hope to get there. And yeah, so we're just digging. We're digging for creatures at this point. Even a fetch land can go ahead and provide us a creature potentially in Dryad Arbor, and that's not the best, but we may have to resort to those sorts of plays this type of game. And there's the Core Spirit Dancer that won us the last game, so it is a threat. Once again, it's vulnerable to removal, but at least our opponent can't just play a hand disruption spell and take away our Core Spirit Dancer here. So we have that going for us. And if our opponent just passes here without playing another creature, we may just want to think about not playing the Spirit Dancer out. And even now, I'm inclined to be conservative in this spot and not play the Core Spirit Dancer. Just going to play a Temple Garden and pass the turn. Because not only could we get our Core Spirit Dancer hit by removal here, but our opponent, that could make the Goyf bigger, that could speed up our opponent's clock. And if our opponent does elect to maybe tap out, if we're able to get this Core Spirit Dancer into play, which it looks like we are going to be able to, it's going to be a big deal because we can put Hyena Umbra onto it and help protect it. So even though we're taking this hit from the Goyf, we definitely are in a decent spot. So I like just taking the 2 off the Temple Garden rather than taking 1 off the Horizon Canopy, just to get our lands into play untapped, essentially. And here's an Umbra. We picked up a Rest in Peace, so that would have been great in our opening hand, clearly. It's not as good now, but it can still shrink down that Goyf if we want to play it. And we're still looking to kind of cantrip our way into some business. Maybe a Daybreak Coronet would be perfect. So we'll see how our opponent looks to attack. It looks like just going to be in the air, which makes sense. Although our opponent could have just attacked with 1 spirit because of the Noble Hierarch. Not particularly relevant, but worth noting. So our opponent is going to be able to flashback this Lingering Souls to essentially get under the Core Spirit Dancer, or sorry, to get under the Rest in Peace in hand. But that's okay. We're just going to continue going off a little bit. So here's the Ethereal Armor. We're looking for now. Well, the Core Spirit Dancer is huge, so we're just going to go ahead and try to win the game with Spirit Mantle and forget about this Rest in Peace for the time being, because if we just play the Spirit Mantle here, we're just looking at 1 more turn of attack. So we can attack for 12 this turn, and then 1 attack next turn should actually finish off our opponent here. So I am going to just play the Horizon Canopy, take a point in order to get this Glade Cover Scout into play. So we're pretty well set up here, and that's just going to be the